Hi guys, welcome back to the Pageant project. Forgive the glasses. I'm going to do something a little bit different this week. I'm going to show you a recording, a live webinar that I did back in 2023 with Isabella Bloedorn. Now, if you're not familiar with her, Isabella in her very first pageant captured the title of Miss Georgia Teen USA, which is no small feat, but she did it off the back of interview. She has won high point in interview in almost every pageant she's ever entered. And I wanted to show you the webinar because I am training a couple of clients, and a lot of them, unsurprisingly, are fixated on interview. It's coming up to pageant season in the US. There's a couple of really big pageants coming up. We had a really big one just take place over the last weekend, Miss Teen Volunteer America in Jackson, Tennessee. But coming down to crunch time, a lot of you may be wondering, how am I actually going to stand out? And here's the thing. I want you to start thinking about strategy, not tactics. Strategy, not tactics. Now, what does that mean? A lot of people tend to focus purely on tactics. And so if you are entering, I'll give you a pageant example. If you're entering a pageant, you might start doing things such as, well, I'm going to hit the gym every day. I'm going to start doing mock interviews. I'm going to find a dress. I'm going to work on my platform. I'm going to start posting social media content. Now, all of that is good. What happens very often, though, is that you just start doing all this stuff and it starts pulling you all over the place. At 5 a.m. you wake up, you go to the gym. At 6 a.m. you go up and you go to work, and then 7 a.m. you get back from work. 7 p.m. you got to start creating content. Then 8 p.m. you got to do something for your platform, on and on and on. And you start feeling like you're pulled apart and you start feeling like you're overwhelmed. What is missing, especially if you've ever felt like you've done a lot of work and then not necessarily been rewarded for it? What is often missing, what is almost always missing, is the strategy that aligns all of your tactics. The strategy that makes sure that when you're doing all of this effort, it's actually pointing in the direction you want to go, and it's pulling you towards your intended target or goal rather than simply pulling you apart. And it does take a certain type of, I'm not going to say brain, although I think one thing you'll notice when you watch or listen back to Isabella's, the way she strategizes and the way she reverse engineers almost pageant interview success, she certainly has a certain type of brain, very, very intelligent, very fast. You can almost literally see the wheels turning. But it definitely takes a certain type of mindset. And it's the mindset that I'm not just going to start working unless I actually know what we're trying to achieve. What's the end goal here? And I've mentioned this in previous videos, previous content, something as simple as you're not going into interview simply to keep your answers down under 30 seconds. You're not going into interview to talk about your talking points. You're not going in the interview to answer certain questions really, really well. What you're actually going into interview for is to sell. Sell yourself as the best contestant to be the next title holder, or to influence, or to persuade. That's the real outcome. And that's what I mean by strategic thinking. It's at higher level thinking that not only makes sure that everything you're doing is aligned, but actually gives you a massive strategic advantage because you know the game that's being played. And it's almost like all your fellow contestants, they're playing checkers whilst you're playing chess. And so at the very, very least, what you'll get is knowing that all the effort that you're putting in, all those early mornings and late nights, they're worth it because you know it's moving the needle in your direction. What I find is very often people like to boast about how busy they are. And busy is just unfocused activity. It's really that simple. And I want you to stop boasting about being busy and start literally take that word out of your vocabulary, busy, and I want you to replace it with one question. Am I being productive? Am I moving the needle in the direction I want it to go? Am I getting closer toward the goalposts? And guess what? You can only answer that question if you've done the strategic thinking up front. Because otherwise, how will you know what the actual goalpost is? Remember, the goal is not to do more mock interviews. The goal is not to do more runway training. The goal probably is to win. and you need to start thinking strategically, what is it actually going to take to win? Especially if you've been close before, if you've been competitive before, and you really, really want to win. You're not just going there to make up numbers. This is probably going to be the missing piece, strategic thinking. So have a look at what Isabella has to say. Have a look at some of the nuances that she goes through and the way that she thinks about interview. It's not just a framework for answering a question. It's much deeper than that. And then sure, frameworks, talking points, all that good stuff is important, but it's only important after you've done the strategic thinking. Because as I often say, success in pageants and a lot of other things in life, it's 80% psychology, 20% mechanics. You do this at your peril. You become fixated on the mechanics without addressing the psychology or the mindset first. Now, just before I get you to the replay of the webinar, I don't think Isabella, unfortunately, is doing coaching anymore. She's actually branched into acting pretty much full-time, and it's probably no surprise after you watch this, she's actually been very successful with it, and pretty much an unprecedented level of success for someone who's started so short a time ago. So because I bumped into Isabella last year in Jackson, Tennessee, when I was over in Miss Volunteer America, and she is doing great. And a lot of it is being strategic with the way she's approaching her acting career in much the same way as she was strategic approaching her pageant interview. So just remember, certain brains tend to work this way, but every brain can. It just takes a certain type of mindset and maybe asking yourself a different set of questions to begin with. Hello, everyone. It's Adrian from the Pageant Project, and my special guest today is Isabella's dog, who has sat here. Look, such a well-behaved dog who came in just before we went.
Right here, that he's just not sitting in.
This is normally what my cat does. My cat will find a way to sit right in the background. Oh, no, he's gone. But my special guest, apart from Isabella's dog, is Isabella Bloedorn herself. Isabella, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. She just turned 20 as well. So did you have a big birthday? I know for you guys, 21 is normally the big one, but how was your birthday?
I didn't do much. I have a twin brother, so I actually had to go up to Virginia and visit him because he goes to a strict military university and couldn't come visit the family in Georgia. So I had to do a 7-hour road trip up to Virginia for my birthday weekend.
7 hour one way or 7 hours?
7 hours one way. So it was 14 hours total.
Wouldn't it just have been easier to fly, or you can't fly? That's painful.
My parents prefer driving up there. I don't.
God, I hope you get on well. Nothing like being on a 7-hour road trip with people you can't stand. But Isabella, for the people watching, so obviously we're talking about pageant interview here, which I don't know from your experience you'd agree, but seems to be the sticking point for most pageant contestants. They're fine being on stage, but they become paralyzed with fear when they're asked to speak. Just for people tuning in who may not be familiar with you, as I said, I've had registrants from all over the world, particularly from Australia. Do you want to just introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, hi, my name is Isabella Bloedorn. My first pageant title ever was Miss Georgia Teen USA. I just kind of thrust myself into the USA system, not knowing, and I happened to be good at interview, and that's the reason I won. And since I realized that was my strength, I have spent the last few years cultivating it. I've done other systems and I've won interview on the national level twice now. And now I've decided to, a little early because I'm only 20, but might as well start early. I started Isabella's Beauties. I have this cute little sign. Fun fact, it is backwards because my webcam actually mirrors it. So I had to put this backwards so that it would look correctly. But I have a brand, Isabella's Beauties, which I just help girls with interview because it is what girls struggle with the most. And figuring out what works for you, because the same tactics don't work for everyone, can be really difficult. So I have a Facebook, I have an Instagram, I have an email. Everything is very consistent. Isabella's Beauties on Instagram, Facebook, and the email is just isabellabeauties@gmail.com. I also have a website, which is also isabellabeauties.com, made by yours truly.
You do a little bit of everything, don't you? Because also there you talk about your video editing, and this is one of the things because you are a Twitch streamer. Now, for most pageant girls, I don't think they know what Twitch streaming is. Do you want to just explain briefly you've got another life, a hidden career? Explain to them about the Twitch streaming because we're talking about interview, and Twitch streaming is you're talking all the time, and most of the time you're actually trying to play a video game
Yes.
whilst talking and entertaining. Which I don't know if you agree with this, but I think that must help you for one of the reasons you get good at anything is practice. And I've got to figure the more you're in public talking, the better you're going to get. So, I mean, A, explain what Twitch is, and then B, do you agree?
Yes. So I am actually on my gaming system right now because it has my best webcam. And the headset I normally use, I just felt like would have been a little distracting, but this is it. It has cat ears. And it lights up. So I just felt like that would be a little distracting, which is why it's sitting on my headphone stand. But Twitch is basically what you said. I love video games and I also love entertainment and being entertaining. So I started live streaming me playing video games. And I do think that one of the things that prepared me the most for interviewing on the USA level, even though I had never done pageantry before, was the fact that I was so dedicated to becoming a famous YouTuber at the time. You realize pretty quickly when you are live streaming or recording yourself that you just sound so miserably boring. Majority of people, the way that we talk as humans normally is so monotone and just a normal voice level that is just so boring when you are in an entertainment setting. So my voice has completely changed. I at all times talk like how I'm talking right now, which is loud. I'm always told to be quiet constantly. And a lot of facial expressions, hand movements, and fluctuation in my voice. It's naturally just going to be so much more engaging versus everyone else who is having a normal conversation with you when I'm all over the place. So I do think that that trained me in how I recommend you should talk and portray yourself in an interview. I do think you need to bump everything up by at least 50%.
I think in today's world where, we have a 3-second attention span or whatever it is, I think the greatest sin is to actually be boring. Because if you're boring, people are going to switch off. And if you're in front of the pageant judges, if you're like the last person and they've interviewed 50 girls today, you have to be entertaining. Otherwise, they're not going to tune into you. I think it's interesting because you mentioned like being entertaining with your voice going, just not just monotone, which is a struggle for someone like me. It tends to be pretty monotone. But you talk about hand gestures. I know a lot of coaches who will say, don't use your hands, almost sit on your hands. And I'm like, well, as long as you're not like waving around all over the place, I don't see there's any problem with that because in a normal conversation, if you're getting passionate, you would talk like this. But just before we go into the mechanics of how to interview, where I know that you know your stuff, most of the questions for you guys tuning in, I asked on Instagram, what questions do you have for Isabella in terms of pageant interview? Because as we already said, it's a sticking point for a lot of you. They're all talking about nervous. Okay. So, I'm nervous before. How can I deal with nerves before the interview? Now, you don't immediately strike me as someone who gets nervous often. I'm sure you're human. So at points you will get nervous. But do you struggle with nerves? And how would you recommend dealing with them just before you're about to go into the interview and you're panicking or whatever, or you're going through, what do I have to say? How does Isabella Bloedorn deal with nerves, assuming she ever gets any?
So I do get immense nerves. I've actually had pretty severe anxiety for as long as I can remember. Literally, I remember being like 5 years old and I was in the gifted program, but if I accidentally went to my normal classroom, the days I was supposed to be in the gifted one, I just wouldn't leave because I was too anxious for anyone to realize I made a mistake. So I have immense social and normal anxiety. And the most disappointing thing you're going to hear this interview is that there is no way to really get rid of your nerves. You can't. Of course, practice is always going to make you a little less nervous, like, getting used to something. It is impossible to get rid of them. I have been doing pageantry now for 5 years. I've been on a national stage 3 times, one being Teen USA. And I still ended up having a panic attack at my last national competition. That happened only a few months ago. I just got off stage and all the nerves hit me at once. And one of the miss backstage took me through a little breathing exercise to prevent me from having a panic attack literally backstage. So it doesn't go away. But I'm someone who's really introspective. I'm always getting in my own mind, looking at things psychologically. And it's not about how you can get rid of your nerves, but it's how you can cope with your nerves. Learning what are healthy coping mechanisms, what you can do to hype yourself up, ease in them, is kind of the most you can do. So it really takes a lot of understanding yourself. If you know that whenever you get nervous, I start freaking out and self-doubting. Well, that self-doubt is a negative coping mechanism. So for example, most people would think this is insane, but anytime I'm about to go on stage, because I actually get the most nerves when I'm about to go on stage, I have to just flood myself with compliments because I have so many self-doubts that for every self-doubt, you need like 10 compliments. So instead, I'm backstage, I'm being like, you are literally the best there's ever been. Like, no one's as good as you. You are going to be the best on the stage, hand down. Like, you shouldn't even be worried because there's no way in any multiverse that you will mess this up. Which is ridiculous. And some people could say conceited, but it's what works for me because such high praise of myself helps knock out the, like, what if I trip?
Yeah.
And I'm someone who, like, I have a vivid imagination. So I'll play myself like falling on stage and I'm like, no, you can't do that. Like, so I have to force myself to not think about it. And there's different coping mechanisms that are going to work for everyone. So the main base is to realize what makes me nervous. Is there any way I can prevent it? And if I can't, what can I do to, make it not as bad or to make me feel better? I have to shut my brain off, or at least I try, because I know the more I think, the more nervous I'll get. Or I'm someone who I have to like keep moving. The second I stand still, I'm going to freak out. So it's really just understanding your body. I get shakes. You can't see right now, but both my legs are shaking right now. I just do. I shake like a chihuahua. So I know I get the shakes and I have to like combat that. Like obviously I don't look like I'm shaking, but that's because I'm so used to it that my shakes are confined to my legs right now.
Okay. So I really wanted to, I knew that you dealt with these issues, but I wanted to say that I didn't know, because I think anyone watching, like anyone who doesn't know you from the outside, they go, oh, Miss Georgia Teen USA, one of the biggest pageant states, one of the biggest pageants in the world. And, she won. So she mustn't get nervous. She's got, best in interview twice at a national level. So how, and then they ask you about nervousness. And I think it's really interesting that you say that you can't get rid of them, that you have to learn how to basically play with them or deal with them. Because I don't think that you'd be human if you never felt nervous. But let me ask you this. So do you get equally nervous in like all situations? So for example, going on stage for you sounds like the on-stage component sounds like it's more daunting for you than interview. And then you have like Twitch streaming. For most, I know a lot of pageant queens who are petrified by the thought of going live. And that's an Instagram live where you get to control everything. Twitch can be off the charts at times because you're also trying to play a game whilst being entertaining. And then you have trolls in chat and you're having to monitor what's going on. So do you get equally nervous in all those situations, or are there some situations where most people would get nervous or many people would get nervous and you're like, no, I don't get nervous in that situation at all?
So a lot of my anxiety and nerves comes specifically from social aspects. My anxiety is mostly social anxiety, which most people would then think, well, interview is going to make you more nervous. But when you think about it, there's way less people watching you in an interview than there is on stage. Just having a conversation with 5 people, the worst you can do is 5 people think that you are not that smart or not that interesting. Yeah. But if you fall on your face in front of a whole audience, because I did cheer competitions, which were the same thing, huge audience. Yeah. It doesn't matter how well trained they are, like these pageant moms, to know that they shouldn't. If you fall or mess up, you're going to hear some, or like, ooh, and that just makes it so much worse. And since the audience, doesn't see the interview, like this is how at least my thought process is. People are like, oh, okay, well, this girl's definitely not going to win because her fitness wasn't very good. Or like keeping track of like, oh, this girl won't be my daughter. And that's just a lot. Yeah. And you spend so long, or at least I do, making my I plan out my walking patterns exactly. Like I have
Hmm.
specific combos I do, and I know that if I don't do this one turn correctly, my transition is wrong and I can no longer get to the next spot.
Right.
And that stuff freaks me out. Whereas like an interview, it's like, okay, maybe I slip up on a word. Maybe they think I'm like not super, super smart. But at the end of the day, like how badly can you mess up a conversation unless you straight up insult people?
Yeah, hopefully you're going to you're not going into interview doing that. But, I mean, you mentioned that you're okay. So which one's more natural for you, or which one do you feel like you just don't? Not that you don't prepare, because I know that you prepare a lot, as you said, with your walking patterns. But which one do you feel that you're more of a natural at, the on stage or the interview?
100% interview. I was a cheerleader, so I'm naturally a very stiff individual. And having to walk on stage is really difficult for me. I can make all the patterns and spins I want in like the world. It doesn't change if I'm like super stiff and not flowy.
Yeah.
So I've definitely had to work on my walk a bunch. It was not, you can find my winning Georgia Teen USA on stage walk on YouTube.
Yeah.
It wasn't very good. Like it was okay, but you wouldn't look at that and think like, man, that's a Georgia Teen USA because I won an interview, not the on stage portion. So I've definitely improved a lot. Whereas with interview, most of the time I just kind of go through it in my head. Like I made a Quizlet for my last one of all the
Hmm.
questions I think I'd be asked. And I actually practiced every single one that I was asked because I'm also really good at guessing what I'm going to
Yeah.
be asked in interview. If you know you have a bio sheet, if you know like this is my platform, this is what I'm interested in, you can kind of guess. That's another thing I do for my girls is I make them, what do I think you are going to be asked in the interview? And
Most
most
likely
of the
question.
time I'm right.
Yeah.
So when when I'm able to prepare like the exact questions in the exact way I know works for me, interview just comes so much better to me than on stage.
I got that. The reason I asked that is because I know a lot of the girls tuning in, a lot of girls who send questions, they'd probably say they feel more confident. Maybe they feel more confident on stage
Mm-hmm.
than in the interview. So I think it's just interesting on the flip where you're more naturally confident in interview than on stage. But you said on stage where you kind of map out the exact walking pattern. So obviously there's a plan, and I assume you practice. And we started talking about nerves at the beginning. We started the conversation talking about nerves. Do you feel that practicing again and again and again is a positive, let's say, coping mechanism for dealing with the nerves?
It depends because I don't think you should ever get to the point where like you are so practiced that you look unnatural or like robotic.
Hmm.
Because then when everything is so meticulously done and practiced, I feel like you just kind of zone out and
Yeah.
disconnect from it.
Yeah.
And so maybe you're not nervous, but I can assure you that's not your best performance. Whereas I always plan, like, I'll know the walking pattern in my head. Like, okay, they told me to go to the middle, then they told me to go to the right, then they told me to go
Hmm.
to the left. And I just have a bunch of combos like stored in my head that I know I like to do. So I'll just be
Yeah.
like, oh, this middle one, I'm going to do, I have a favorite combo. Like, this is my favorite combo. I did it at Teen USA and I
Yeah.
fell in love with it. I'm like, this is my favorite combo. Over here, I'll be like, okay, I need to do something that can get me to the left. There's a specific combo with a turn that looks great getting me to the
Yeah.
left. So I'm like, I'll do that one. And I get last one. I'm like, okay, let me pick one of my combos with an exit turn. And then I just
Hmm.
stick it there. And then I
Yeah.
don't really plan anything else. That way, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm never going to be in a moment frozen, like, oh my God, I don't know what pose to do. Because
Yeah.
that's where a lot of nerves come from. But like, I don't know what spins to do. I don't know what pose to do. Or you'll do something you regret and it sticks with you for the rest of the
Mm.
walk. I don't have to worry about that. But I do have to worry about like what facial should I do, how's my walk looking? Because that keeps me in the moment and
Yeah.
human,
Got it.
not like robotic.
Not a walking robot. I mean, just from hearing what you're saying, and I want people to clue in on this. You already said you're introspective, and I know you are. So there's a lot of analysis going on. But just the way that you're explaining how you deal with walk, where you said it's already not your natural milieu, so to speak, and you've got certain patterns. And then you've got certain parts where you can, let's say, not improvise, but can keep you in the moment. That is a sign, I think, of someone who's analyzed a lot. Maybe you'd say overanalyzed in some cases, how to perform at her best. And you already said that your brain's always on. And as someone who's like that, but I think you're even, I'm not going to say worse than me, but I think your brain, because at our last interview, after our interview, you were talking about like having multiple conversations in your head at the same time. So I just want to ask a really fundamental question, and then we'll move on to the mechanics, because I think it's very important, like you get yourself in the right state before you try and do something. How do you switch your brain off, or how are you able to turn it down? Because I feel very often that our worst critic is ourselves. That's cliche, that's a given. How can you kind of turn that off so that when you're having to perform, you're not getting in your own way?
I will say I don't think I ever turn my brain off. I think it's less of like turning your brain off and making sure you're in the correct mindset, which you hear that all the time, but it's never really like explained. Yep. Whereas I used to be a very pessimistic person. Like I absolutely for a long time lived life very pessimistically. And a lot of people don't realize how much of a problem that is, because your brain, just the way it is if you tell yourself something enough or someone says something enough to you, you will believe that it is true.
Yeah.
That's how people believe like their own lies. So if you are like so willing to put yourself down, you are actually going to feel that way. And, you know, it's the fine line between confidence and like cockiness and conceitedness. But I do think that I am absolutely my number one fan, because I have to be. Because if you're not, you are also your number one critic. And that's not something that's going to go away. So if you're already your number one critic, if you're not your number one fan, then that pessimism is going to be stronger than the optimism. And I've definitely had to learn that while it's okay to criticize yourself and be like, this can be better, it's never okay to put yourself down. You know, I can be like, these are things I want to change, but I shouldn't be like, these are awful and it needs to change. I should be like, okay, you know, this isn't great. I'd prefer myself this way. And then the things that I can't change, I just don't even deal with. Like, that's what happens in pageantry with like physical insecurities. There are certain things where it's like, I just won't even think about or harp on. I just refuse to, because I can't change it. So why would I harp on it? You know?
Yeah. It would be a waste of time. You mean things like your height, for example. There's nothing you can do about your height, so there's no point worrying about it.
Exactly. Or, you know, there's certain things in my body that I know a lot of girls are insecure about. And it's, from my mindset, it's like, that's how my body's always been, and it's never going to be otherwise. For example, I have insane hip dips. Girls talk about hip dips all the time. I have hip dips. Like, they go in. Very, very prominent. And I didn't even realize that was something that I, quote unquote, should be insecure about till like a few years ago, because everyone was talking about it on the internet. And I just frame it as like, that's literally how my hips have always been. They're never not going to be that way. You know, you don't really think things are ugly until people tell you they are. So why would I listen to those people, you know?
Yeah, I think that also it goes in and out of fashion, because at one stage thigh gaps were the craze. And now, you know, having muscle is much more acceptable and even preferable. So if you had starved yourself to get the thigh gaps, now you're feeling a bit stupid because now you have to, you know, as I say, be thick sort of thing. But okay, so that's the mental prep. So trying to get yourself in the right mindset. If a girl comes to you, and I said I've got Australians, Americans, they come to you and they say, "Oh, help me with interview," and they say, "Help me with interview," because they think if they do well at interview, they got a better chance at winning their dream title. That all makes sense. Where would you start? Let's say it's someone that you don't really know, and maybe they're not even that sure as to how to. Maybe it's their first pageant. Where would you generally start?
It's really important to know how someone interviews, because everyone's at different starting points and everyone's just different in how they convey themselves. I always try to get as much like info from them as possible. So example, like send me previous bio sheets. Some girls, like I know personally, I have 2 of my interviews, because I did 2 online interviews, my 2 national winning ones. I have both of those. So I send those to girls too. Like if I'm like, if you are interested to hear what my interviews are like. because I feel like that's important too. You know, you're just taking my word on the fact that I won,
Of
but you don't
course.
actually know what my interview skills are like. So
Yep.
I do also send girls my interview. I try to see if they have any bio sheets, like their writing ability. Actually,
Hmm.
your ability to convey yourself in written form directly translates to your ability to convey yourself verbally.
Yeah.
I also want to know how they feel, like what do they feel their strengths and weaknesses are. And then pretty much from the beginning, I ask them to do a mock interview because I
Hmm.
also need to know how comfortable you are going to be with me. I have one girl, love her to death. We are literally like best friends at this point. She can't do like a mock interview with me. She like freezes up because she sees me as a friend now, and she's like, well, I can't interview with friends. And
Yep.
I'm like, girlfriend, I need to know where you're at. So like we will have like a 30-minute struggle before I can get her to mock interview with me. So it can be rough sometimes. But just seeing where they are starting, what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, and what exactly they want to improve at, you know, I have to know those things to know how we're going to proceed. All girls are different. I've had girls who I was like, wow, I'm not gonna lie, you need barely any help. Like, you just need a little
Yep.
refining. I had a girl who she only had 2 weeks till her national competition. She's the last girl crowned. We worked through a bunch of things all in one night. She won interview at Miss America Outstanding Teen, which is insane because their Miss America Outstanding Teen is known for interview. They have the hardest interview.
Mm.
And she won the interview and got first runner up overall. Like, she barely needed anything. She just needed some confidence, some push, and some reassurance.
Yeah.
Whereas I also have another girl who we have her doing vocab daily because I just really need her to expand
Okay.
her vocab because she has so many great things to say. It just doesn't, she doesn't know how to articulate it.
Mm.
So
Uh,
different girls need different things.
do you ever take someone on and go, basically, you don't need any help? Because I've done that with the coaching that I do is more mindset. And as you said, it's sometimes just reassurance that you're on the right path. Just keep doing what you're doing. So just running me through the gamut of what are the most frequently like seen problems in your role as a interview coach? And I know you do other coaching as well, but just as an interview coach, what seem to be the most common issues? We already talked about the nervousness. That seems to be a big sticking point for a lot of people. But aside from that, I was thinking there seems to be two kinds of people. If they get a bit nervous or over aroused, it's fight or flight. And they either freeze up and can't say anything, or they go the other way and they have the verbal diarrhea where they can't stop talking and their 3 minute, their 3 minute interview is taken up with tell us a little bit about yourself, and it's gone 5 minutes and they still haven't gotten off of that. What are some of the most common issues that you deal with as a coach?
So I think both those things you listed can be traced back to a lot of the times. Sorry, these headphones. A lot of the times it can be traced back to the fact that people don't actually have the vocabulary or ability to express themselves how they desire.
Mm.
A lot of the times, either you freeze up because you don't have the word to describe what you are thinking in your mind, or you do that verbal diarrhea because you're having to over explain because you don't
Yep.
have the proper wordage. I think one of the biggest advantages I had going into interview, and something that came inherently to me, was my vocabulary and my ability to articulate myself, because another dream job of mine, I had so many as a kid, was to be an author. And I've written a ton of books. I've written like 11 books for fun. And I'm currently writing a book that I'm actually wanting to publish. And a big thing is I always wanted it to be like a high reading level book. I wanted to be a medieval fantasy, like Lord of the Rings type.
Mm.
And I needed a really good grasp of grammar and vocabulary and articulation to be able to write this book.
Mm.
And it makes it so I honestly feel like I just never run into the inability to express what I am thinking. Sometimes maybe it's like, okay, there's multiple ways I can say this, I have to choose, but I
Yeah.
never run out of vocab, or I don't have a word that can describe what I'm wanting to tell you. And that makes it so easy in interview because no matter what the question is and no matter what I'm trying to say, I know that I will at least be able to get it out of my mouth. Even if it's not exactly what I wanted to say, it's going to
Yeah.
sound good. It's going to have proper grammar. You know, I'm probably going to have a few nice sounding words in there. And everything will at least be a good interview. Even if it's not one of my stellar interviews, it'll be
Yeah.
good and things will be answered. But a lot of times I have girls who they even ask me, they'll send me an Instagram post and they're like, can you rewrite this to just sound more professional? And I'm like, you should have these professional words in your vocabulary. Like, you should be able to say these words. But honestly, a lot of people don't prioritize it. And I even know there's been multiple times where people in my life have been like, wow, that was such like a big word. And I'm like, I am 20 years old. What do you mean that was a big word? I used the word palatable once, and like this person was shocked. They're like, wow, that was like honestly like a really impressive word to convey, what palatable means.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what other word would I have used besides palatable? Like
Yum.
Able to digest? Like, I don't I started using Audacity by like 8th grade, which I think 8th graders should be able to use the word Audacity. I don't know. But like people are like, that's a strong word for an 8th grader. I was like, okay.
Where did you get your vocab from? Because I agree with you that a lot of, I think especially in this day and age, it's people are reading, I think, less and less, and it's more like the YouTube and stuff that you do and I do as well. And we're taught that you want to turn that down, like make your words as simple as possible, because otherwise you basically alienate people. But in terms of having I think you should be able to do both. I think there are times when you wanted to turn it down, but you also need the ability to turn it on and use, I don't even call them big words, but words other than like and yes,
Yeah.
and yum, that was so yummy. I'm like, how old are you? Are you 3? And so I've had to turn it down. But where did you get your vocab from? Was it something that you went, okay, I'm going to study like basically word of the day sort of thing? Or was it from reading, or was it from somewhere else?
I actually did a lot of reading, but I think it comes a lot from the fact that I was a kid who was always told, like, I'm wise beyond my years. Like, I was a gifted kid. And since I had this social anxiety, which specifically applies to people my age, I get really nervous around people my age. I was just always talking with adults.
Yeah.
Adults were always willing to talk to me because they felt like I wasn't, a rambunctious little kid, like wise above my years.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to talk to kids my age because it made me anxious. So I honestly spent a lot of time talking to adults. And I think it's really important. This is a whole nother topic I could talk about forever on. I think it's really important that if you want your kid to be well-spoken and articulate, you talk to them like a mini adult throughout their life.
Yeah.
It's easy to want to baby a kid and use those like small words. But if you are talking to a kid with your normal vocabulary, they're going to pick up those words, figure out what they mean in the context, and that's going to join their vocabulary. So honestly, I feel like almost all of my vocabulary came from the adults around me, because reading can help. But if you're reading a book and you don't know a word, I mean, unless you look it up, you kind of just like read past and be like, okay, that was a weird word. I don't really need to know though. So I really think it came from talking, because I also like never shut up either.
Right. I can't go past a word without knowing what it is. I mean, I was watching a YouTuber the other day and he said apotheosis, and I'd heard the word, but I didn't know what it meant.
I don't think I've even heard that.
It's apotheosis is a culmination of everything. So it's like everything coming together. So like all your pageant prep, it's the apotheosis of my pageant prep. And I was like, what does that mean?
Oh, are you saying apotheosis? Maybe we just pronounce it differently.
I don't even know how to pronounce it because it's a brand new word for me. I don't even know how to spell it. It's possible because you're American and I'm Australian that we pronounce it.
Yeah, we might just say it different. I was like, that sounds like a word I know, and I was like, is it apotheosis? Because I've used.
Well, you guys say aluminum and we say aluminium, and I was actually looked like you guys actually spell it differently now. So it's a miracle we can even understand one another. So we talked about the importance of practice and a certain type of practice. But just the incidental practice, I want to ask you. So obviously, so people want to have a conversation with you, a session with you. Isabella's Beauties, send you a message, send you an email. But obviously they can't like 24/7. Some people just want to practice to know they're getting better, because maybe they don't have the gift of the gab and they know they need more practice, which I think is a good thing. What about incidental practice? So, maybe they don't have the ability to have a friend who's got the patience to just drill them with questions all day. And I also think just practicing good level quality conversation really is very important, because the more comfortable you are having a conversation where you don't exactly know what the other person's going to say, I think that's going to stand you in better stead and help you express yourself. So are there ways that people away from you can just practice, or
I guess the question is how do you practice? Because people always say go away and practice. I'm like, that's that saying, like, practice makes perfect, but then they say perfect practice makes perfect. So for people who aren't, let's say, as naturally gifted or talented in interview, and they know they need practice, what are some of the ways that you would suggest that they can go away and actually practice?
So one of my just like personal favorite things to do, and I do this when I'm in the car or like in the shower, like somewhere where I have nothing to do anyways. I will, this is a way to get like actual pageant questions said to you, you know, without needing someone. I will look up like Miss Universe or like Miss America top 5 question, and they're all over YouTube. And you just play the video, the announcer asks the questions, you pause it, you give your little spiel just right off the top of your head, pause, and then you unpause it and listen to what the girl said in that actual moment. And from that point, I think, you know, do I like anything she said? Like, did she hit something that I was like, wow, you know, I should have thought of that? Did I say anything that I'm like, okay, maybe I would have worded that differently? Yeah. And then from there, I just think, okay, let me give one more answer and like fix maybe those things. And then I move on. And then I do the next question. And I think the part I have to stress the most about that is you literally only do it once. Because if you over practice, you'll become scripted. And you just cycle through these videos and it puts you on the spot of like you're in a top 5 answer. But also gives you the opportunity to improve. And there's so many of those videos online. And some pageants ask weird questions. So you're going to even be hit by questions that like you probably have never thought of before. But that stimulates your brain and puts you in a spot where, okay, you've never thought about that. So what are you going to answer? Because you might get a question you've never thought about. My first ever top 5 answer, I had never thought about in my life. I was 15 years old at Georgia Teen USA, and they asked me what I think the governor should do to help benefit teens nowadays. And I hadn't even known that we had just elected a governor at the time because I was 15 and I didn't care about politics. So I had never really thought about it, but I had to give an answer, and I gave one that I was really proud of. Or even in my interview, they asked me what some people would consider basic questions, but basic questions can trip you up the most. Because they asked me what motivates me towards success.
Yeah.
Which I answered failure at the time, which I'd never really thought of. Then they asked me how I dealt with failure, and I don't deal with failure very well. So I had to really think about it.
Okay. That leads me to what I want to ask is like, so people do get stuck. Like people's nightmare on stage is tripping. People's nightmare in interview is getting stuck or giving that answer that's gone viral. I can't remember, it was like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, that one where she basically made everyone just, I'm sure she's not stupid, but I'm sure she sees that and she gets like post-traumatic stress syndrome. And I was going to ask, like, what do you do? Because people have the phobia of getting asked a question they can't answer. And for me, and I was thinking, well, I never get stuck because I always have something to say. But the thing that would kind of stress me out are the really basic questions, or questions that I almost think, like, couldn't you ask me a better question? And I know that might sound conceited, but it's like, the one I hate is, if you could be a tree, what tree would you be? And that question just sets me off. I'm like, that's what you want to, that is such a stupid, but I wouldn't be able to answer that, obviously, in a pageant interview. So whatever your version of getting stuck is, how do you deal, I guess, which questions not frighten you, but which questions do you get a bit stuck on? You already said one was, when you were 15, you didn't know anything about the governor. And then how do you deal with the stuckness?
First of all, I hate any questions that are like, why should you win? Not like, what, I like questions where it's like, if you won, what would you do with the title? But saying like, why should we pick you? I've never liked those because you run the really dangerous line of insulting the other contestants.
Yeah.
Because if you say, like, I'm all these things, that's why you should crown me. Like, are you saying the other girls?
You're insinuating the other girls aren't. Exactly.
So I've always hated that one. And you guys can steal this, anyone watching. This is what I do. I start out by saying, while I can't speak for any other contestants, some of the things that I'm most proud of in myself are blah, 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 blah. And I can even say, like, I think this is really unique to me. By saying I think, I'm not saying, like, these girls, they don't do it, only me. That can help you with that specific one, because I've thought about that one. I also hate anything that's like, tell me about yourself, or like use 3 words to describe yourself, because they are so vague. As an individual, the second you hit like teenager, you have already like developed so much beyond 3 words or the ability to tell someone about yourself in like 20 seconds. There's just so much to you that you can't possibly cover all at once. And that's where learning how to condense your answers comes in, which that is very difficult for a lot of girls, learning to condense. But my main things is I think a lot of girls don't realize that one of the things that pretty much no one ever judges you on, like it would take someone who is really rude to like, and it's probably just some pageant mom mad that her daughter's on the top 5 would say this. But if you take a second to think, no one's going to be mad. You know, like there's lots of times where girls, they'll answer a question, they ponder for like max 3 seconds, you know, like just let it sink in, and then they start their answer. And, you know, a lot of girls are actually commended on that because it means you actually took a second to think about what you want to say. And as long as what you say after, you know, was thoughtful, then like no one's going to judge you. And if you don't want to be that person who takes the pause, I generally don't. I just say something in the beginning that allows me to think. So I've said before, like, personally, I believe that. And that takes me about 2 seconds. And just saying personally, I believe that, or like in my opinion, or like regarding that topic, I believe, just random independent clauses or dependent clauses allow you time to think. And sometimes those few seconds are all you really need, because most people are going to be surprised at how quick you are on your feet in that moment. A lot of people think there's just no way. But once you're actually in that top 5 position, almost, you know, you rarely see girls actually fumble, because most of the time you are able to. And people don't give super, super difficult questions generally. That doesn't apply to everything. Because
of course,
pageant directors don't want anyone to embarrass themselves. Like, they're rooting for you.
Do you ever do the so just with that phrase you put at the front that gives you time to think, do you ever use the one where you thank the judge for the question? Because I got to tell you, in Australia, that's the one that everyone seems to be trained to say, and it drives me crazy because you then sound like everyone else from the get-go. So I don't like that. But have you seen girls do that? And what are your thoughts on that?
I don't really see that in America.
Okay.
And in my opinion, I'd say no, because it's very obvious you are stalling at that point.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Like, you're stalling. You know, no one's going to judge if you're like, you know, really digesting the question for a second, or if you just add a little phrase in the beginning. Because like, whatever, make sure your answers sound nicer anyways. You're not immediately jumping into the meat of it. But if you're like, thank you so much for your question, like that is really thoughtful and amazing, you either look like you're sucking up to the judge or you look like you're stalling.
Yeah.
And neither are great, because, you know, if they are using that as a tiebreaker and then the judge is like, oh, well, you're sucking up to me, I don't like that. You know, like, I would err on the side of doing something less obvious. Because you never know who's going to be like, no, I don't like you stalling.
Well, I mean, that very often that segues into they thank the judge for the question, and then they go on to say something about the audience and thanking them and saying how nice they look. And I'm just like, are you actually going? And then they don't answer the question.
Wouldn't you run out of time?
Well, they don't have an answer to give. This is the thing. So when it comes to answering a difficult question, so you know they're not supposed to ask you about controversial topics. But let's say you just get that question that really, really puts you on the spot, and you do need to think of something on the spot. I mean, has that ever happened to you? I mean, you said it happened when you were 15 years old and they asked you about the governor, which is a slightly political question, I guess, but not really. So what, in your head, how do you deal with that? Because I know a lot of girls, they get that question, and then they come on the stage, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. So it's like they knew what they should have, they know how to answer it. But in that moment, they get stuck and they give less than their best answer. Mm-hmm. And I think that happens to a certain point to all of us. We always look back, you know, hindsight is 20/20, so to speak, and we go, oh, I could have said this, I could have said that. But how do you deal with it in that moment when you're being asked a question that really stumps you or is slightly inappropriate, or they really said they shouldn't have asked you, but they ask you anyway? How do you deal with it in the moment?
So I think for one that you aren't sure on, I'll start with that one because like I wasn't sure when I realized I got a political question at 15. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my god, my nightmare. My whole family was sinking in their seats. They're like, she's done. This is something I do, which varies on capability. But since I have so many inner monologues, I can do this. I start thinking of my answer before they have finished the question, personally. When they said governor, that's my cue. That sets off, okay, political. What do I know about politics? It wasn't a lot, but what do I know? So I'm like, what do I think they're going to ask me? Is it going to be about voting? Because we're teenagers. What can it be about? And then once I switched to governor, I was like, okay, it has something specifically with my state. And then as they're asking, like, what do you think he should do to help benefit? And by then I'm like, okay, shoot. Like, I need to know, like, he is doing something.
Yeah.
And they finish the question. And by then I have all the info. I'm like, okay, it's political, has to do with my state. Like, what is he going to do to help benefit us? Luckily, that's pretty vague. And at that point, I'm just like, what do I think would make a difference? And I just grabbed onto the first thing I thought of. Because, if it's good, just grab it. Don't think what could be better, grab it.
Yeah.
And I grabbed onto the education system because honestly, the girl before me talked about SATs. So I'm like, okay, that was the first thing on my mind. That's good enough. And I grabbed it and I went on a little spiel about how I think in our education system, so many resources are put into high level kids like AP honors and not in the general ed programs. Mm-hmm. And it really shows that schools are just pushing for high graduation rates because there are these inflated grades and these 99% graduation rates. When you look at the corresponding SATs, the numbers are abnormally low. They are not matching where they are supposed to.
Yeah.
And that's specifically a huge problem in Georgia because we have the Zell Miller and Hope scholarships. And if you have, a 4.0 GPA, you absolutely, without a doubt, should be able to get that 1200 SAT to get that Zell Miller, but so many kids can't. And it's because in reality, they're not actually being prepped correctly in their classes.
Right.
So, could I said better things except fix our schools? Probably. But that's the first thing I grabbed onto. And if it works, it works. As for questions that are, highly controversial or probably shouldn't have asked, there's a few examples of that. There's actually, you can find online. It was a pretty recent Miss USA, less than a decade ago, where they asked her, because it was when Trump and Hillary Clinton. Sorry. Trump and Hillary Clinton were running. And a judge thought it was appropriate to ask a contestant, who are you voting for, Trump or Hillary Clinton?
Oh, that's nightmare level.
That is so inappropriate to ask someone who they're voting for. And especially during this time where you should be prioritizing on something like the contestant believes in or a last final statement. And you ask for that, knowing how divisive it is in our country. Yeah. She did a really good job of basically saying, I'm not answering that without saying that. Good. You just honestly don't answer and sound as respectful as possible. It should be the example should be I respect everyone's ability to vote, and our democracy gives us a chance to elect who we believe is right for our country.
Yeah.
And, while I don't feel comfortable asking or answering that, or just something along the line saying I'm not answering that, I think it is a really important part of our government. And that's the way you can sound professional without being I'm not answering that, but don't feel obligated to answer an inappropriate question.
Good.
And when it comes to political questions, you're going to get different opinions from different people. So it's really hard. I know people who think straight up, say what you believe no matter what. I'm someone who I think you should never lie. Don't lie and say something you don't believe in. But you are obviously in a very professional setting, somewhere where there's people of different views on everything. And I don't think it's ever a good thing to be an instigator. Someone who wants to make people upset. There's been times I've been at pageants where people say stuff and the audience gets angry. Yeah. And I think that in every way, whatever political belief you say, I absolutely think there's a way to be respectful and not offensive in the way you say it. And I think it's very important to be aware of how to frame your beliefs in a non-offensive way. Because some people, unfortunately, just don't think of that. They think, well, I'm just saying what I believe. But in every instance, you can choose your wording in a way that's not going to hurt people. It's just a conscious effort you make or you don't. And as a pageant title holder, you are representing your whole
That's the
state,
thing.
your whole
Yeah.
country, the universe potentially.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to always prioritize being like a kind person and not hurting someone if you can prevent it.
Of course. You just to go back on that quick, because people also, in terms of pageant prep, they will read up on current affairs, which I think is a good thing, know what's happening in the world. What I think is interesting is you took that question about the governor, just to go back to that, and then you turned it to education, or the girl before you answered about the SAT, so that was on your head. So you went to education, which is something obviously you have in-depth knowledge about, because you riffed off a whole list of facts that, a lot of people, especially me, not being in America, I would have no idea. But it makes you sound good, because it sounds like you've really given this some thought, you know what you're talking about. So how important, when you're coaching girls, how important is just knowing stuff about as many topics as possible? Because from my experience, when I'm interviewing someone, I will always try to find something that I can latch onto and have some knowledge about, so you can build that rapport with someone. So for example, if I'm interviewing someone in Tennessee and then they talk about country music, I don't mind country music, but then I've just started playing the violin, the fiddle, Devil Went Down to Georgia, etc. So we can build a bond. How important is that, just knowledge of what's going on in the world, in terms of being able to deal with as many different interview questions?
Mm-hmm. I think while majority of the time you're never going to run into like, because you don't know this thing, you cannot answer the question. But it's always going to be beneficial. There's never going to be a time where throwing in a correct statistic or this fun little piece of knowledge or a current event isn't going to make your answer sound better. Because I could have answered that education thing without mentioning graduation percentages and SATs, but it would have been nowhere near as strong of an answer.
Yep.
So I do think, personally, this is just the way I prepare. I always make sure I know current events, and this might sound crazy to some people, but I think it's useful. If your pageant has announced their judges, you should know what your judges are interested in and what they do. Yeah. Because then you know what they're probably going to ask you about. The time that I had someone who worked for a lot of different news stations, he asked me about fake news. Like, I knew that was going to come. People who work in like athletic departments almost always ask you something regarding fitness. It's what they're interested in. It's what they want to know from you.
Yeah.
So doing your research, not only on like the pageant's morals, the judges, what they're interested, but also current events. Even if you don't end up using it, it was better to have it than to not have it. It's better to have more information that you need than less. Yeah. I even personally have, not even when it comes to current events, I have little like phrases that I know and like hold dear, like that pertain to a lot of different questions that I use in interviews all the time. If my interview judges ever came together one day, they'd realize I use a lot of the same fun phrases on them. For example, every time I talk about entertainment, I am almost always going to give you, my favorite quote is always shoot for the moon, because even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And I really hold that dear to me. Whatever. It's true. It's my favorite quote, but I tell every single interview judge that quote.
Yeah.
It just sounds so good. I have so many that like I let my girls steal from me all the time. If you're ever talking about, like, this one is new, I heard it in a song and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. If you're ever talking about insecurities and people judging you, one of my favorite quotes is, I'm trying to remember it now. They think you're an ugly duckling because they've never seen a swan. Oh, that's so cute. That is so cute. It's from that story, Little Ugly Duckling.
I've heard that somewhere. Yeah.
It's a whole thing of how these ducks like judge this little ugly duckling. It's because they've never seen someone like them before. They look different, but they grow up into this beautiful swan. And so, never let someone treat you like they're ugly, like you're ugly, because they've just never seen a swan. And I'm like, that is so cute. Maybe it's a little conceited. Definitely feel your judges out on that one. But if someone said that to me, I'd be like, that is so clever. That is so cute. I just have like a bunch of them stored in my mind that every once in a while, something where it works will come up. And I'm like, oh my God, fun quote. And then you hit them with it and they're like, wow, she's so smart. She's so well articulated. What an amazing analogy. Like, so creative.
Yeah. I'm not laughing at you. I'm just like, where does this all go when you Twitch? Because like when you're on Twitch, because obviously you don't bring these up, or do you bring? I've watched some of your Twitch streams, but you don't seem to like. It's interesting. You don't talk like this, obviously, on your Twitch streams. I just find it really interesting because it's like all this information stored in your brain, and then we go shoot other people and build buildings. Which please stop playing Fortnite with buildings.
I'm actually playing Fortnite after this on stream. Unfortunately,
I was going to say, but please play no build. I used to play Fortnite with my brother, and I got sick of it because you'd shoot someone once, and then before you knew it, there was the Eiffel Tower in front of you. And
oh
I'm
my
like,
god,
I
know.
I got so annoyed one time. I stopped shooting and I just stood there and I just watched them build the building, and then I got shot. I'm like, I'm done. So, but anyway, I don't need to go down the Fortnite rabbit hole. I just want to ask, so for people watching this, Isabella's beauties, can you just walk them through? They get in touch with you. What's sort of the path that they can look forward to or anticipate if and when they decide to take you on as a coach? Because I want to prepare girls for that, because they might go, oh my God, like she won't want to work with me because I'm nervous and, I find her intimidating because she's so well spoken. And I literally interviewed one girl, then afterwards she said, I felt like a celebrity because you interviewed Isabella. I'm like, oh, okay. So there's going to be, no, honestly. So there are going to be some girls who just go, oh, like, I really want to take her on, but she wouldn't want to work with me because I'm terrible. And so what's the path? What should they do? Get in touch with you? How, etc.?
Yeah. Well, anyone who made it this far, I'll let you know, currently, all my coaching is actually free. This is just like a passion project for me right now, and it's something that I want to develop over time. I really have only been in pageantry for 5 years, even though I do have these, immense skills in interview. But so for anyone who like trusts me enough to, watch this or like reach out, all I ask for in exchange is, pictures of you when you're at your pageant looking cute so I can do some marketing. But right now, all of my pageant coaching is free for those who trust me.
That's insane.
I do kind of like anything you could ask me. There's girls who I write their bio sheets. Obviously, I'm not forging things for you. You have to answer the questions, tell me what you want to convey, and I help you convey it in the best, most enticing way possible. Because one of the things about after I won Georgia Teen USA, they told me I had the best bio sheet, so they were interested in me before I even walked through the door. So a lot of girls don't realize that your bio sheets is the first real thing that they know about you. Same with social media. I help with social media too. I have a lot of knowledge about social media algorithms. My last two pageant accounts I had, I doubled the following throughout my reign, as well as increased all of the analytics by like over hundreds of percentages. Even my, current pageant account I have right now that I'm so busy. I feel bad. I've been posting a lot on, but my analytics are fantastic, and I'm keeping up with, the other accounts that they're paired with. Just because I know how to use it so well that my engagement is great, even with less posting than I normally would do. So I help with social media, help with branding. I can help with walking. It's on my thing. I personally will probably
I can help with walking too, but I'm like, no, I mean, you can come to me if you want. But,
it's one of those things where like, I'll help you make patterns, but I'm still working on my own actual walk personally. I can help you make cool combos. And then I do videography and editing, because there are a lot of pageants where you have to do video work. And I make all my video work. It's on my website, actually. If you go on my website, you can see a few examples of video work I've done for pageantry. But all you have to do is kind of reach out. I have the email if you want to keep things really formal. I have isabellasbeauties@gmail.com. That is what's going to be answered the fastest, because I get alerts straight to my phone. The Instagram account sometimes doesn't alert me, and it might take me a second to find your DM. Okay. But that is another great way to reach out to me. And once we've reached out, I'm 20. We're all chill here. I'm a little informal with my girls. Like, we have each other's phone numbers. I have had my girl Leah, who she's like been with me from the very beginning. She will just call me at like 2 a.m. And if I'm asleep, I'm not going to answer your call, but generally I'm awake at 2 a.m. But, and like I said, she's the one who texts me and be like, can you write an Instagram post for me? So it's super chill here if you are stressed out about, because a lot of girls are too stressed to have these super, in the business for decades coaches, because it is kind of stressful. Like they don't mess around. I will say that is one of the advantages of me is we are pretty chill. I'm going to be really candid with you. I'm still doing pageants. I'm in a hiatus right now as I prepare for Miss, which will be like a 3-year hiatus, but I'm still on the grind. Like, I'm working on my Miss body right now. I feel you. I'm in the pageant business. I'm not retired yet. So I know what you're going through. And if you're a Georgia girl, I'll come to your pageants too. I like showing up.
You're not going to do all of this for free, though, right? And I don't want you. I don't want you to. Right? I mean, I get at the moment you start, but obviously, I mean, your time is in demand. You had a casting or something today, right? So I'm it's very generous of you, and it's your decision. But I don't want girls to think that they can just take up all your time.
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised because a lot of people do end up offering to pay just because, if they do.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not expected, but I have been paid before because when people, if they find success with my coaching or they really appreciate what I've done, then yeah. But ultimately, it's not my full-time gig being a coach. I do modeling and acting. But that's kind of the great thing about modeling and acting is I actually do have a lot of free time. If I'm not actively booked for a shoot that lasts multiple days, I do have more free time than the average person. Because I'm not shooting every single day unless it's an acting thing. And then if that's the case, they'll know that I'm booked out for that amount of time. But
okay. All right. So get in touch with you, start a conversation from the sounds of it. And I like the idea of a bit more chilled or relaxed because I think that's a lot less intimidating. And I think a lot of the coaches have been in the business a long time. I think it's funny because sometimes I see the way they speak and I'm like, I don't want to speak like you. So that's just the thing that I don't think necessarily more experience means that you're better and listing off a whole. That's why I like that you put up your interviews. Your interviews are in public because then people can actually see how you speak. Where I think I don't like it when a coach says they can do a bunch of stuff, but there's no proof of it. And then they want, hundreds of dollars up front. I'm like, we need to have a conversation here because I think there's a lot of that just in general. But isabellasbeauties@gmail.com. Sounds like that's the best way to get in touch. Yes. There you go. And I think in the replay, it'll actually be flipped. Weirdly enough. I think it'll be the right way around. I don't know why it does this with this software.
Well, you're correct because the good vibes is correct. I think it's just my webcam.
Oh no.
No.
Right. That's reversed for me.
Oh no.
So
Oh no. This is gonna be backwards.
No, because it's backward. No, yours looks backwards for me.
This is confusing.
It is on the replay.
This is correct for me. Okay, we'll see what happens in the replay. This may be right. This may be wrong.
But anyway, if you can't read that, just get a mirror and flip it around. You'll be fine. isabellasbeauties@gmail.com. Thank you so much for coming on, Isabella. Best of luck with everything. Thank you so much for imparting your wisdom. I can completely understand why you're taking a hiatus, but it sounds like you're so good at interview. It's almost like you should do another pageant just so you can keep doing these interviews. But you're going to go stream now, Fortnite? Are we streaming Fortnite?
Yes. I think so. My friends that I usually play with are online, so I need to get consistent with streaming again. I used to stream every single day, but
what happened with your Valorant streaming? We're not doing that anymore.
Valorant is a very frustrating game because
and Fortnite is not.
Look, in Fortnite, I choose my teammates or I can play by myself. In Valorant, unless you have 4 buddies at your disposal, you don't get to choose your teammates. And most people in lower ranks, which is where I'm at, don't understand
how to play.
It's a team game. And they play selfishly. And then it just affects the whole team. And I almost broke my keyboard because it made me so upset. I mean, it's a cheap keyboard, so it's not it's pretty easy to break, but.
Don't.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Is that, I'm going to say I feel your pain because I've been playing a fair bit of Destiny 2 with my brother. And in those ones, the fire team is 3 people. And we got put into a raid with this other person who obviously had been disconnected. His 2 teammates had bailed on him. but he was so impatient. Like there's a lift to go to the next stage, and he set off the lift before we got there, and then we couldn't go up, so we were just stuck behind. I'm like, I know it's frustrating for you, but we can't help you if you play selfishly. So I feel your pain. I'll let you go and become frustrated at Fortnite. But thank you so much for coming on one more time. isabellasbeauties@gmail.com. And if you've watched this far, then I think you should definitely give Isabella a message and see what she can do for you. But yeah, that's it. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Chat to you soon.